It's so good to be here with you all this evening. We've had a good day so far. We went and played football with a load of the youth. We did a youth versus adults football match over at Coley Park. It was a great time. I think Kit is absolutely exhausted from it now. Unfortunately, the adults did win. It was 6-2, so I think there were some grumpy teenagers by the end of it. But anyway, you might be wondering where Keith is this evening. He unfortunately got stuck in traffic, so he's not here. But I don't know what he's doing at home, probably just loving life. But anyway, I'm going to speak to you all on something this evening, which I've named Give God Your Yes. And so I'd like to take this opportunity to share with you just from my favourite verse in the Bible. I never understood how people had favourite verses before, but I feel like as soon as you get one, you're like, yeah, I like that one. And so this was the verse which I really felt God calling me into ministry. It's always that verse that I go back to, maybe in times of self-doubt or times of worry. And so I want to read you from Isaiah 6, verse 8. So if you've got your Bibles, get that up ready now. But just beforehand, here is a little bit of context. So the prophet Isaiah, he started off his ministry in 739 BC, which was just after the king of Judah had died from leprosy. So a long, long time ago, older than anyone in this room. But anyway, we see in Isaiah 6 the beginning of Isaiah's ministry, which he receives this vision from the Lord. And so Isaiah has a vision from the Lord seated on his throne in the temple. And the seraphim, they cried, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord Almighty. The whole earth is full of his glory." Kind of similar, we were singing that just a minute ago. And so Isaiah is in the presence of holiness, and with that he immediately recognizes his own sinfulness. And so just a couple of chapters just before, in Isaiah 6 verse 5, Isaiah says, "Woe to me, I am ruined, for I am a man of unclean lips, and I live among a people of unclean lips." And so Isaiah wasn't perfect. He was like the rest of us. He describes himself as a man of unclean lips. And like Isaiah, we're all unworthy, but God cleanses us to make us holy so that we can be used for his purpose. He recognized his own sinfulness and realized that he was not worthy to stand in the presence of such holiness, which is God. So let's delve in to Isaiah 6, verse 8, which says, I had that one ready for you. Okay, so it says, "I heard the voice of the Lord saying, 'Whom shall I send, and who will go for us?' Then I said, 'Here am I, send me.' He said, 'Go and tell this people, be ever hearing but never understanding, be ever seeing but never perceiving.'" So we hear God, he starts off this verse by saying, he asks this question, "Whom shall I send and who will go for us?" And so after Isaiah is purified, God asks that question. God is looking for someone willing. His question is not just for Isaiah, but it's a question that can be asked to us today as well. Whom shall I send? The call today, it might not feel quite as obvious. It might not be quite as dramatic, but nonetheless, the question still poses, who will go for him? God is sending us into our communities, into our workplaces, maybe even to a different country. Now, I'm sure many of you know, in the Second World War, pigeons were used to carry messages. Now, if you know me well, to be honest, even if you know me a little bit, because I do talk about it a lot, I absolutely hate pigeons. They're like my worst fear. I'm talking... It doesn't work living in Reading, not liking pigeons, because I walk into the town, they just swarm up my feet. I don't even have bread or anything, but they're just everywhere, aren't they? And if you know me really well, because I've got to say it, because otherwise Aaron and Sophie will call me out on it afterwards, but we live on the 3rd story of a flat, and I just don't like opening my windows, because I'm that's pigeon level, isn't it? They're going to go right in. But anyway, enough of my pigeon trauma. These pigeons, they held these special messages in containers on their back or maybe on their legs. And they were sent to share these messages. Now, to some that might feel like a little bit of a random link. However, God is sending us to share the message of his gospel, like how these pigeons shared these important messages in the war. We need to be sent to those who need to hear about Jesus. Now, it's all well and good saying that God is sending us, but what for? So in general terms, he's sending us to share the gospel, to make disciples of all nations. And so the call is for everyone. And we read in Matthew 28 about the Great Commission. And so Jesus is speaking to his apostles and he says, "Go therefore and make disciples of all nations." It's not just a call for the 11, but it's more than that. It's a call for us as well. Jesus says afterwards, "And surely I am with you always to the very end of the age." This call is for us. The baton has been passed on to us to go and make Jesus known to everyone, everywhere. Now, Jesus, he's not necessarily asking us to pack our bags and move across the world to become a missionary. He might be doing that to you, but your job is a mission field in itself. Set a Christ-like example by being honest, dependable, a good team player, by being kind, preventing conflict, being selfless, persevering. You can witness by example in your actions, and so let your example be a sermon to your co-workers. So we've spoken about like the general term of God's call, but what about the more specific term of God's call? What is God calling you to do in your own personal life? I believe that God called me into ministry, specifically youth ministry, through this verse. And some of you may have heard my testimony before, and I don't really care. I'm going to share it again because testimonies are good, aren't they? It's good to hear them. So let me share mine with you. So I was brought up in a Christian home, pastor's kid, still am a pastor's kid, but we'll fast forward that a little bit to the age of when I was 17. And so I was just working out where to go to university. And so I actually applied to Reading Uni, so you might have been stuck with me regardless of what had happened. But I also was applying to go to Bible college to train to be a youth pastor. So spoiler alert, I think you can tell what happened. But anyway, I attended this Christian festival called Creation Fest. It's like Limitless Festival, but for like Cornish people, I guess, isn't it? And anyway, I was in the main area and the worship was going on. And worship team, like, close your ears right now because I was not feeling the worship. I know you shouldn't say that, you shouldn't. But I didn't know like any of the songs. I was stressing about where to go to university. So I thought, where shall I go? Let me just go to the toilets. Like, I know you've all done that before, so don't judge me. You've all gone to the toilets during a time of worship. And so anyway, I leave the worship area. I'm sat there and I'm like, God, if you want me to go to Bible college and you want me to be a youth worker, I need to hear the word send me or it's not happening. And so sure enough, I walked back into the worship area and like everyone in there was just shouting, send me. So I turned to Kit, I'm like, I'm going to Bible college. He must have been like, okay, cool. But anyway, God is so faithful. He continues to be, and there's been times like that throughout the rest of my testimony. And I just want to emphasize that God's calling might not just be into full-time ministry like how mine was. You don't have to be becoming a pastor, a youth pastor, a worship pastor, an elder, a missionary, because no matter your age, gender, or ethnicity, God has a calling on your life. And so we need to open our ears and to listen. The calling isn't about position, but it's about obedience. Isaiah's yes came from a place of surrender and worship. God might not ask you to preach to the nations, but he might ask you to talk to that lonely classmate. He might ask you to help a neighbor or to serve at church, or maybe just to stand up for what is right. Our lives, they can be so busy, can't they? And we can struggle to hear the call of God. I wonder if you've ever gone to like a big concert or a big gathering. Has anyone been to a big event? Yeah. With the mixture of people talking and the music playing, sometimes it can be like really difficult to tune into the music playing and like your ears are ringing, aren't they? Well, sometimes like that, lots of people, they wear these like noise cancelling headphones. Have you seen them as well? They cut out some of the distractions so you can just really focus in on the music. The call of God is a little bit like that. Sometimes we need to put on those headphones. And so I wonder, are you going to leave those headphones at home or in your bag? Or are you going to pick them up, put them on, and really tune in and cancel out that distraction, but tune into the calling of God? Isaiah, he follows up the question by saying, then I said, here am I, send me. So he gives this enthusiastic response. Isaiah didn't know where he was going or what he was being sent for. I wonder if you've ever had it when you were younger and maybe your parents are asking you to like clean the dishes, you know, Or maybe you're a parent and you've asked your children to do that. Or maybe you just asked your partner to do it. Kit asks me sometimes. But sometimes you have to ask the question 2 or 3 times. Or maybe you've got to rephrase that question. But there was none of that with Isaiah, because Isaiah didn't have to be asked more than once. He didn't have to have the question rephrased, because he was willing and ready to go. We may not know where God is taking us or what he's going to do with us, but all we need to know is that God is going to be with us step by step, guiding us, and he'll help us overcome those challenges along the way. And Isaiah, he gives this response of surrender. He was ready to serve and be served and used by his master. And so similarly to when we give God our yes and say, yeah, send me, it's not always going to be an easy ride, but let me remind you that it's worth it, because we need to be willing to step outside of our comfort zones instead of just staying within these walls. Our lives shouldn't just be about comfort, but about obedience and perseverance. We need to be available and not just wait until we feel ready, because God will equip us. Our lives are not our own, but they're God's. And so we must accept his sending, because we have been called as followers of Jesus to serve and not to be served. Isaiah's response, it required trust in God. Trust that God would equip him and give him the right tools for the task ahead. Now, all things being said, God didn't exactly give Isaiah an easy mission. He was sent to speak to people who just didn't want to listen at all. And so as this verse says, go and tell this people, be ever hearing but never understanding, be ever seeing but never perceiving. I wonder if you've ever had it when you're speaking to someone and you just know they don't want to engage in conversation with you. You can just tell they are so not interested. And if you've ever seen a teenager in the morning, you know that's quite a regular scenario. Or maybe the teenagers after football today. But I'm sure if any of you have done that, then when God says this, go and tell this people, they didn't want to hear it. They were unresponsive. And so his mission was a challenge. He would have faced discomfort. He would have faced rejection. But God gave him strength and perseverance to get on through. Sometimes it can be easy to see this calling as a chore, but it's an honor that each and every one of us have been given the word of God to share and proclaim on the behalf of the Lord. And so we need to ensure that our hearts are in check. When we go on a trip, we make sure we fill up our tank with petrol, don't we? To make sure we can get it to the end destination. Similarly to this, when we are sent by God, we need to make sure we're filling up on things like prayer and things like fasting, things like spending time with God, putting that all at the center of what we do to make sure we're going to make it through. And so I wonder, how are we going to respond? Will you give God your yes today and say, yes, send me? Far too often we can reply to God's call like how Jonah did rather than how Isaiah did. The book of Jonah, it starts with him afraid to stand up for what he knew was right, and he did the opposite of what God was asking him to do. Jonah fled in the opposite direction. And whilst, yes, he did come around in the end, it was in Isaiah's testimony that from the word go, he went. But you know, the great thing about God is that God is a kind and forgiving God. And so whilst, yes, Jonah did run away from God's call, he gave him another chance. And so maybe you've previously ignored or you've disobeyed God's call. It's not too late to be used by God and to be sent. We just finished at the start of January, I don't know if you can remember all the way back then, a time of consecration. But just because that series has finished, let's not let that finish in our lives as well. Isaiah recognized who God is. And so are you ready to represent Jesus in your week, to your workplace, to your friends, to your families? Are you ready to be sent? Let's consecrate this week. God doesn't just call prophets, but he calls us too. But like any call, you have to answer and you have to listen. I'm going to play a song now, and we're just going to put the lyrics on the screen. And quite fittingly, the song is called Send Me. But I just want to encourage you this evening just to really read those lyrics and ask God, what is he sending you to do? Or what is the next step of your calling? So if we could just have that on now, that would be great.